everyone, and welcome to this week's exciting edition of the Thrive Careers podcast. And today we are going to be talking about navigating the world of work, especially for the Gen Zs. You know, a lot of people talk about Gen Zs and no one is really paying attention to grooming them and preparing them for what is ahead of them and helping them to settle within the workforce. And joining us, we have Brianne, who is going to introduce herself shortly, and then we'll get the conversation started. So over to you, Brianne.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really am excited to be here. And a part of that excitement is exactly what you were saying is I've kind of realized that Gen Z and a lot of the people who are going from their college into their career lives, they're lacking a lot of the guidance. And it was the same for me when I was there. There's all these opportunities, but there's very little guidance for how to take advantage of those opportunities. So with that in mind, I've created what I'm calling the Independence Lab. And it's really a thriving hub where young women or young people can go to learn how to set up a foundation for their professional, personal, and financial lives moving forward. So I'm very excited to be here and thank you for having me.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We have a tradition on this show. We ask a very fun related question, which is if your career journey were to be a movie, what would the title be and why?
Yeah. So I thought long and hard about what to name my company, and it's the Independence Lab. And I think that would be the name of the movie, honestly,
Hmm.
because when people are moving from college career to their actual career, their career life and professional life, it's really this first time that they're being truly independent as a young adult. So that's kind of the first word. And then the lab part is because it's all about experimenting and trying, and independence is really a work in progress. So I think that would be the name of my movie.
Amazing, and I love it. Independence is a work in progress. That's really fantastic. Thank you so much. And before we get into our core conversation for today, I just have a follow-up question. Why are you passionate about young people? Why have you chosen to focus on this crux of people, to help them prepare for the world of work? Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yes. So I really felt like when I was going from graduation into the professional world, there were so many opportunities. It was almost like you're standing on this cliff and everything as far as you can see is open to you. But there's really not a lot of guidance, and there's not guidance in how you handle your career, in how you handle your finances, in how you change your routines so that it's not, your college, you can stay in bed as long as you want, eat what you want. You have to actually get up, go to your job, show up, and do a good job. So, how do you change your life routines to reflect this new life that you have? And I just think that if I can provide not only my insights, but insights of very accomplished professional women in the world to these younger people who are going through this transition, it will be helpful for them. And it's a gap that exists today that I think I can help fill.
And that's really powerful. It really is a gap that exists. And like I said in my intro, a lot of people just talk about it and no one is really putting in the work to help these people. So I'm glad we're having this conversation. So thank you, Brian. I think you're doing something wonderful and I'm excited to be a part of it. All right. So you said something very important and now we are getting into the core of our conversation today, which is, building all of those routine and getting into the world of work. Growing up for me, one of the virtues that I learned from my parents is hard work. You want to get more, you need to put in more work. You want to get promoted, then you have to do more work. If every other person is doing 8 to 5, then you have to do 8 to 7. Then you have to do 8 to 10. Even if it's not convenient, even if your health is failing, whatever it is, just get the job done because that's the only way we knew could lead to promotion. But times are changing, and especially for the Gen Z. So I want you to tell us on this conversation how times are changing, how that has evolved, and is it still about hard work in today's world? Does hard work alone lead to promotion?
I'm not going to say that you don't have to work hard. I don't want to say that you don't have to work hard. But it is no longer acceptable to work hard to the extent where your mental health or your physical health is paying the price for that, or your social life, because that's important.
Mm.
So I am really of the mindset that there is something that will help you get promoted, and it's not just hard work alone. It's actually this idea of emotional intelligence. And there's 5 parts of emotional intelligence. It's self-awareness, so just being aware of what am I good at and what do I need to work at. The second one is self regulation. This was huge for me making this transition. Self regulation just means that you're able to calm yourself when you're under pressure. And my very first interview, I was still in college, I was interviewing for my dream internship. And this woman asked me a question that I just did not prepare for. And instead of panicking, I asked her, do you mind if we come back to that question? And I took a breath and we went through the rest of the interview. And at the end, I said, can we come back to that? And I gave her my answer. And after we hung up the phone, I was like, man, I totally bombed that interview. But the truth was, she was so impressed with how I handled myself and how I regulated myself that she created an internship just for me. And that ended up being my dream job in New York City. I got to move there and work at this amazing company doing what I loved. So it all actually came down to self regulation for that. So that was number 2. Number 3 is motivation. You have to actually want it. You have to actually work, like we said. You have to go for it. Number 4 is empathy. You have to understand what your boss needs and provide it. You have to understand what your colleagues need and provide it. And you have to understand, if you have clients or customers, what they need and provide it. So just understanding people and their feelings, their wants, their needs is going to take you very, very far. And I think we'll dig more into that one. And then the 5th is communication skills. So if you have good communication skills, it's going to set you up for leadership down the line. So all of those things were not about necessarily working hard, but working in the best way that you're setting up your career for success.
Amazing stuff. I love every single point that you made. But the one that stood out for me in particular is the self-regulation, the ability to be in control. I think that's really powerful. And that came through in the example that you shared as well. And, you talked about that leading you to a dream job. So I wanted you to just tell us a bit about that as well, because while I was checking through your profile, I noticed one of the achievements that you also had is you've been able to accomplish a lot at a very young age. So do you want to tell us a bit about how you've been able to put that stuff?
Yeah. So that dream internship
Mm-hmm.
was for a magazine company in New York that published magazines that were in the dance and cheerleading world. So Dance Spirit magazine, Dance magazine, American Cheerleader magazine. And for me personally, I was a cheerleader growing up and a competitive dancer growing
Okay.
up. And so that was one part of this equation. The other part was that I was a journalism major. I loved writing. I loved magazines. That was something that I just loved, that glossy feeling in my hand. And so combining those two things, it was literally my dream job to work there and work in these magazines. And so that self-regulation allowed me to get that internship. Within 3 weeks, they offered me a full-time job. It was entry level, but I was there. It was my mecca. I was so excited, and I took that job, of course. And then 1 year from there, I had moved up the ranks and became a managing editor. And what a managing editor is at these magazines and most magazines is kind of that second in charge. So there's the editor in chief, and then there's the managing editor. So within this like 1 year time period, I had gone from literally the intern who wasn't being paid to second in line at this magazine, at Dance Spirit magazine. And a lot of that was due to my emotional intelligence skills. It wasn't because I was the best writer or the best editor or the best dancer or any of those things. It was because I figured out what they needed and I applied myself to fill those holes and those gaps. And they recognized that. They saw that in me and they said, you know what, this is great. Even though she's young, she's able to fill these roles.
That's amazing. What I heard you say, which I also am familiar with, is that technical competence is no longer enough. Emotional intelligence and a bulk of some of the things that you've shared today would always help you to grow faster. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. So I'm particularly interested in this next question, right? Which is, do you feel that Gen Zs are being unfairly labeled? What do you think about that notion? Do you think that, they are being judged and that could be holding some of them back from really going for what they really want?
Yes. So in my role today, my title at my day job now is VP of Operations. And that means I am interviewing and hiring people all the time for new roles within our company. And so I'm hearing the feedback from other people that I work with, people on the hiring teams, and there are certain things that Gen Z is categorized as. One of them is that they're job hoppers. So they go from job to job to job just to get higher salaries. Or another one is that they are entitled. They think that they deserve these high salaries, even though they don't have the experience to match them. Of course, there's things that we know are absolutely true. You're walking into the gender pay gap issues that are there. So it's still scientifically proven that women are paid less than men, which is super unfortunate. And then also there's this whole tipping point of AI. And so are people going to lose their job or not be able to get jobs because artificial intelligence is taking these jobs? So all of these things are coming together, colliding and compounding in a way that Gen Z doesn't have the greatest reputation, and they're going up against these challenges, and it's not a very welcoming job, situation for them. And so I really am empathizing with them, and I really think that if they are able to focus on things like emotional intelligence and applying themselves in these ways that we've talked about, and even more so like this idea of lifelong learning, which is part of that motivation and self-awareness, to learn things like AI, they can overcome these challenges and overcome these hurdles, or even overcome this reputation of Gen Z if they apply that emotional intelligence along the way.
That's really beautiful. And, it keeps coming up in most of our conversation today, emotional intelligence. And for me, I always like, for us to break things down to the point where everybody can really understand. I know that people talk about emotional intelligence, we hear it here and there, but can you really break it down further? What are those specifics? So I imagine that a young person is listening to this podcast right now and is hearing emotional intelligence and is wondering how exactly, do I begin to put this to work? What are those behaviors? If you get my point. So let's break it down into practicals. What actions should they be taking that shows that they are now emotionally intelligent, or what tools should they use that could help? So yeah, take it away.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's a lot to take in, and it's intangible. That's the whole point of it. It's that
Yeah.
kind of like X factor that people have or don't have. But what I love about emotional intelligence is this is not something that, is just given to somebody at birth. It is something that anybody can learn if they put their time or their effort into picking up these skills and developing them. Anybody can improve and have high emotional intelligence. So, with that in mind, I've created what I'm calling the EQ success method. So, it breaks it down, makes it a little bit easier for young people or anybody really to develop these skills. So, the first one is, and they're all S's to make it even easier. So, self mastery. And that's this idea of just being aware. So, set an alarm on your phone 2 times or 3 times a day to simply check in with yourself. Maybe it's in the morning. How am I feeling today, and how is that going to impact my day later? If I'm feeling agitated, how can I overcome that? If you're checking in after a meeting that you had at work, did a colleague cut you off and it made you angry? How did you handle that? Did you handle it well? Did you shrink? Did you get mad and confrontational? Could you do better? So just checking in with yourself is number one. That's it. You don't even have to do anything more. Number two, stability under pressure. This is what we were talking about with the self-regulation. If you are in an interview, obviously your nerves are going to be kind of, at their peak, right? You're going to be nervous, and that can cause you to panic. But if you have that stability and that self-regulation, it's going to help you come off as mature and prepared. And so what you can do there is two things that I recommend. One, ask for what you need, like I did in that interview. Just say, can we come back to it? Can you repeat that question? Ask for what you need. The second one is simple box breathing. I'm sure you've heard this. It's just breathe in for 4, hold it for 4, breathe out for 4, hold it for 4. And this really calms your body and your nerves. So that stability is number 2. Number 3 is social intelligence. Just really noticing things that you wouldn't necessarily think about on a conscious level. So if you go into a meeting with your boss, who do they respect? Who are they looking to for guidance? You should notice who holds influence and how they do it in the workplace or really anywhere that you go. So just understanding the lay of the land. Some people say, read the room. That's really important. So that's that context of social. Strategic conversations or strategic communication is number 4. So really thinking about how you interact. Is it the right words? Are you talking with the right tone? Is your body language saying the right thing? And then you can apply all of that to those really big conversations along the way in your career. So you're interviewing, you asking for a raise, that's a really big one. So bringing your biggest wins in the best way, the most strategic way possible, is something that you can work on. So strategic conversations or communication. And then the last one is something we haven't really talked about yet, but I think is so important for Gen Z. And it's in my EQ5. It's another S, and it's smart money moves. So setting up your financial foundation is really, really important for young people. You need to have your emergency savings. You have to have a plan for paying off any debt that you may have. You just need to feel secure so that you can go into your career and your daily lives and your social lives without having to have this anxiety of your finances in the back of your head. So setting that up and making smart money moves would be number 5.
That's amazing. I enjoyed listening to that, especially the number 5. I think that's an unpopular opinion, and I think that's really important because that's sometimes where the stress comes from when you have that financial pressure, and all of that. So thank you for demystifying those concepts with us, and thank you for sharing that. Very helpful and very beneficial. All right, so moving on, you sort of already touched on some of the questions that I prepared with your response, but we can still contextualize things a bit further. So talking about self-advocacy right now, I know I started about, Gen Zs being labeled, and all of that. So how can they really advocate for themselves without coming across as being entitled?
My best advice here, and it's the advice I used for every promotion I've ever gotten, was to do the work first. It is impossible to call somebody entitled if they have already done the work. So I'll give you an example of my current role. I work at a digital marketing agency now. And when I was hired there, my role was content manager. I was creating digital content for companies and I was tasked with building that department. So that's what I did, and I did it well. As I worked there longer, I started to notice what our agency as a whole needed, what the business as a whole needed from the big picture, not just my department. And I started to take on those projects, the ones that weren't anybody else's job, or the ones that were kind of messy or that nobody really wanted to raise their hand for. I started to take those on, even if they were not part of my actual job description. And so I was able to do this work and then 6 months later point to it and say, well, I'm actually doing the work of an operations role. And so I was able to use that information, that data, that impact, and those results to say, my new role should be the VP of operations. And so that was how I made that jump into a completely different role, but also a promotion from going from at that point a director level to a VP level. And it was all about looking at, what does the CEO need? What does our company need to grow, and filling those gaps? And that was huge. And anytime I look back at my career of when I've been promoted, it's exactly that, is I've done the work first. And I think it's impossible to be called entitled if you do the work.
Absolutely. And I love the way you responded to that. It's impossible to be called entitled if you already put in the work. And I love the example you also shared of, looking for how to add value as against just waiting for handouts. All right,
Okay.
so yeah, let's talk about the secret networking as a secret to getting promotion or to also get on the promotion radar. Is there any role that relationship building plays in helping to get on the promotion radar?
Yes, yes. I actually just did an interview with my dear friend who works at EY, and her best bit of advice was to network even before you get in the door,
Hmm.
if possible. She works at this giant global company, but she has been able to secure so many promotions within the company. And I asked her why. And she said, I literally tried to talk to everybody. I tried to meet people who are not on my team. I tried to talk to people who are above me, below me, next to me on the ladder. And the reason for that is because when opportunities come up, positions come up, they aren't necessarily posted on a job board somewhere, or they aren't just tapping you on the shoulder and saying, do you want this opportunity? It's all at a level like that at a company like an EY or an IBM or something that's really big. Or even if you're trying to go from a small company to a different company, it's gonna be about who you know. You need to network. And one of the best pieces of advice I got when I was in college and starting to think about my career was say yes to every first conversation. That was a big life-changing thing for me. And there were a lot of conversations that, of course, went nowhere, but I got to meet some really cool people. But there were also conversations along the way that changed my life immediately. So that is something, if I could stress, is do not hold back from meeting new people. Even if somebody comes to you and says, hey, I know this person, it may not be the best opportunity, but maybe I'll connect you and have a conversation. Say yes. Say yes. Talk to them, network, because you just never know. Maybe their next job is going to be a job that you would die to have, and they have the power to hire you. So, yes, build those relationships, network, say yes.
Say yes. Absolutely fantastic. And I love it. And in the Gen Z balance, this is spill the tea moment that Brian has just shared with us. So impactful. She also gave out a secret. I'm an HR person by background, and I understand the importance of the hidden job market. It's not every time the organizations go out and put their jobs on job boards and on Indeed and you start applying. There is the hidden job market, and that comes from building networks, a rich network. And she also gave you a simple formula that you can easily use, which is say yes to the first conversations. You never know where it is going to lead you. And I think that's really important because you can really build on from there. Nowadays, if you're not paying attention to networking, it's a real game changer, and that cannot be overemphasized. And thank you, Brian, for giving us that formula of say yes. Please say yes. Even if you don't sound convincing, even if you feel like you're blabbing, start the conversation first and see, where it leads. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. All right. So moving on, the bulk of our listeners on this show are young people,
Mhm.
career professionals, job seekers. So questions like this are things that they look out for, when listening to the podcast. Do you want to share, how they can deliver impactful stories that would help them land job offers and just show
Yes.
value during interviews?
Yeah. So again, I get the opportunity to interview a lot of people, and there's a couple things that really, really stand out to me. And what I want you to take away from this is remembering that curiosity and confidence are going to beat your credentials.
Hmm.
And what I mean by that is a lot of women in particular will not apply for a job if they don't have 100% of the items that are written in the job description. And that's such a disservice to themselves because you can learn and grow those skills that are listed. But if you go in there and show them listen, I've got 60, I've got 80% of these skills that you have listed, but I am a learner. I am going to put myself to the task of learning everything. I'm going to make sure that I'm reading and listening and joining these master classes. I'm going to do what it takes to learn. And here's 3 examples of how I learned, in my volunteer position or during a club at college or my part-time job. Here's examples of how I did that. It's going to blow them away. What they want is somebody who is a self-starter. They want people who are willing to learn along the way. So if you go in there with a strong enough foundation, but maybe not 100% there, and show them that you've got the curiosity, you've got the confidence that you can learn it, that's going to stand out way more than somebody that comes in and said, "Yep, I'm good for this role. Hire me." And then they're kind of a bump on the log for the rest of their time there. So that's going to be something that makes you stand out. So I would really encourage you to tell those stories of how you helped yourself learn previous, whether it's a position, part-time job, volunteer, class, whatever it is that you have. Apply, do it. Just go and apply for the things, even if you don't have 100%, and then go in there with confidence and show that you're willing to learn. You are going to stand out during those interviews, and people are going to be so thrilled with your excitement. They're going to want to give you a job offer.
Amazing. I love it. I love it. And I just want to add to what you have said. So, to be able to tell those stories confidently, you need to have done some of those things. If you already have those stories in your archive, they can come naturally to you to share in those situations. So, that's just the bit I wanted to add. Whatever your hands find to do in those waiting periods are very critical. Do them well, whether it is volunteering, whether it is babysitting at home. It's how you bring those stories to life that matters and connects it to the organizational goals at the end of the day. So go all out, do whatever it is that your hands find to do. Do it well enough to be able to tell the stories, and that can help you stand out in interviews.
I agree. I'm so glad that you said that. Write it down. Write down your stories. Write down your experiences
Yeah.
and tie it to the bullets in the job description. That's pure gold.
Amazing. Beautiful. We've just given you guys cheat code, today. Just go and work with these formulas and you're sure to get
Yes.
results. This final question before we get to the rapid fire, and it's the unspoken workplace rules that Gen Zs needs to know. What we believe is that Gen Zs are, they don't follow the rules. They are rule breakers and all that. So what are those unspoken workplace rules that you think that Gen Zs needs to know and be aware of?
It's no longer about putting your head down, working hard, and staying in your lane. Do not do that. That is what our parents did and what got them promoted, or your grandparents. It is not that today. It is emotional intelligence outranking expertise. It is that. That is the unspoken rule. So if you can develop those and create your high emotional intelligence doing everything we've just talked about today, I promise you will go far. Because when you go into an interview, this is something that helped me just really clear my mind. The person that is interviewing you for that job, they are hoping it is you, and they are hoping that you will be a next leader in their company. So do those things, and you will be well on your way to that career foundation that we've been speaking about.
Amazing stuff. Thank you so much, Brian, for these amazing tips that you've shared with us in this conversation today, and for helping build confidence, in young people to be all that they can be and, succeed on their jobs, and by also helping to clarify some of those misconceptions and, how they can set themselves up for promotion and for success in their career. It's been an engaging and insightful conversation. Thank you so much. Before we let you go, because we like to keep things at 100 and we are serving young people, so we have some quick rapid fire questions. Don't overthink it. Just give us what comes to your mind the first time. So, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Awesome. So, what was the first job you ever had?
Babysitting when I was 12. Way too young.
See, when I touched on babysitting the other time, I never knew your background. That's beautiful. And I'm sure that, that has helped, in your career progression somehow. So yeah, thanks for letting us know that. So for you, is it Slack or email? Which is your go-to?
I hate to say it, but it's email because all those interruptions, I can't do deep work. So I'm going to go email. Sorry.
That's fine. So what's your go-to power outfit?
Ooh. An unexpected blazer.
Mm,
So a bright blazer, a silk blazer, a blazer with a pattern, a blazer.
amazing. I love it. Unexpected. All right. So what's the worst piece of career advice you've ever received? This is a twist.
Worst, yes, keep your head down and work hard.
Because that's definitely not going to take you anywhere. All right, so let's switch it over. So, what's the best piece of advice, of career advice you've ever received?
Figure out what your boss needs and provide that. Be helpful and be aware of how you can make an impact that your boss and your company will appreciate.
That's another secret you just gave out. Thank you so much. And I'm sure our listeners caught on that. The last one workplace rule that you love to break.
Yes, stay in your lane. If that's a rule I will break every time.
I don't need to ask you why, because we've talked about networking, and building relationships. So if you're staying in your lane, how are you going to build those quality relationships with people? Thank you so much. I've enjoyed this conversation thoroughly. And I know that our audience would definitely love, to reach out to you. But before that, so two things that I want you to do as we close. Tell us your last words. What would you like to say to our listeners out there, Gen Zs in particular, because this particular episode is for them and every young and aspiring person out there. So what's your last words to them? And also tell us how they can find you and connect with you.
Well, I will leave you with my last words of advice being that just a reminder that emotional intelligence is going to outrank expertise in your career. So don't forget to develop those soft skills. And where they can find me, I am at Brianne, Brianne, at the lab on Instagram. But honestly, there's so much about this. And I know we talked about our EQ5. It's a little bit hard to understand all of that in the abstract. So what I did is I created a free PDF ebook. I actually sell it for $19, but for your listeners, because you're so passionate, I'm so passionate, I want to gift it to your listeners for free. So if you go to, I'm sure you will put it in the show notes, but if you go to theindependencelab.com/playbook, it is there for you for free. So theindependencelab.com/playbook. And Olajumoke, I am so appreciative of you having me on. Thank you so much. You are a great interviewer and I appreciate it today.
Thank you so much, Brian. And for that free gift, I didn't see that coming. Thank you. Our listeners would love that. Thank you so much. And it's been a pleasure speaking with you and sharing your thoughts with us on this episode of the Thrive Careers podcast. Thank you so much. And that brings us to the end of this conversation. Bye, everyone, and have a great time.
Thank you.